to see. We got you in. There we go. Fantastic. So I'm Bonnie Norris, and I'm one of the district managers here in Ohio for the Association Member Benefits Advisors. And we do want to welcome you all here today. We usually have with us your president, Gary Monto, with us, but I talked to him a little bit earlier, and he is battling a water leak. So it sounds like he could about go surfing through the building. So he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to be on with us today, Jim. So with me today also is Jim Kane. Jim, why don't you say hello to the folks today?
Good morning, everyone.
So today we are tackling, really the single biggest threat to our retirees, and that's a question that we're posed. And Jim, it's really one of the top two questions we get day in and day out, isn't it, from our retirees?
It is. It is. It's actually become the single biggest threat as far as financial, based on Medicare cuts. And a lot of our members just simply don't understand where Medicare starts, where they start, where people are left holding the bag. And for most of us, most importantly, what triggers Medicare's dollars coming in. And that's some of the things that we'll be sharing today.
Okay. And, I'm sure all of you out here have a reason for attending today. And I know we have several folks that join us every month and enjoy the information, that we pass along. But there's some of you out there that probably have a very personal story about why you want to, really look into elder care. For me, it was actually my grandparents both ended up in a nursing home back in the 70s. And, there wasn't a whole lot of options then. And my grandmother was actually diagnosed at that time with what they called hardening of the arteries. Do you remember that, Jim? They didn't really talk about Alzheimer's or dementia. And my grandfather, he was a big man, he had worked for the pipeline, he'd worked for the school district. And he actually ended up walking with two canes, and he had mobility issues. And at that time, they had to go into the nursing home. And I still remember as a little girl, we actually had to get their house and their farm ready to sell just to pay for the nursing home. And I'll never forget that. So that's one of the reasons that I do this, is just to make sure that other families don't have to go through, those types of things today. So we do, welcome everyone here today. And again, if you do have questions, put those in the chat today, or go ahead and scan that QR code. And, I shared a little bit about myself. I'm actually down in Oxford, Ohio, so Southwest Ohio, where we had 3 inches of snow on Saturday. And I've been with AMBA for almost 8 years, and have, had a great time working with our retirees and learning from this gentleman that's here with me co-hosting today. So Jim, tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
I've been with AMBA and working with Ohio's retirees for about 10 years. And prior to that, I actually ran nursing homes, home health agencies, and rehab centers, which has actually lent itself very favorable to me, helping our retirees navigate the Medicare space and the long-term care space, or in today's world, something referred to as short-term care. But look forward to sharing more of that in a few minutes.
Okay. And we did just get a post on our Q&A. It says we're having some technical difficulties with the chat function. So folks, if you do have a question, please put that in where it says Q&A. So you can just type your question in there, and Jim and I will be monitoring that as we go through the morning here, because we want to be able to answer all of your questions today. And just a little bit of information about who AMBA is, if this is your first time joining us today. Just a reminder, AMBA is actually the association member, all of you, benefits advisors, folks like Jim Kane and myself. And we actually work with over 80 different associations across the United States. And they're all retired teachers and school employees and public employees. And here in Ohio, we're so grateful to be able to work with the police and fire retirees of Ohio, the school employee retirees of Ohio, Ohio Retired Teachers Association, and the public employee retirees. And it's interesting because, sometimes when I'm trying to explain to people, what an association is and, how does that impact, all of those associations, just like your PFRO, really does 4 major functions. PFRO, Gary and the rest of the board members are really your pension watchdogs. They're making sure that, the folks in Columbus and Washington, D.C. aren't doing anything that's going to negatively impact you. And they're really fighting for you. They have your back on that. They also help to, the association also helps to preserve your health benefits. Many times when you folks were still working, this time of year, your HR director or benefits person would come out and say, okay, do you want this? Yes or no? And maybe when you retired, you lost some of those benefits. Or maybe at that point, there was really not a need for some of the things that you need now or finding yourself needing here in retirement. So your association helps to provide those. And then there's also that social connection. Jim, I had the opportunity to attend the state PFRO meeting last month. What was that, like the 23rd of October, and get to visit with members across the state. And we continue to have those programs, whether it's local chapter meetings. I know you and I have been able to speak at some of those, or things like attending the play ball back in the summer with the other members of PFRO. So it's a great way for retirees to be able to connect to folks that they worked with, or at least walked in their same shoes. And then finally, the association is able to offer those important exclusive benefits and discounts. And Jim, just as an aside, remember next month, we're actually going to do the discounts as our Teaching Tuesday for all of the different things that our members are entitled to, because everybody likes to save money, and especially with the holiday season and travel season coming up. So that's a little bit about the association, and hopefully everyone is reading their newsletters. And I know we have Missy on the call as an attendee today, and of course Missy is the glue that keeps the association together and keeps it running. And she and I spoke just real briefly before we went on air today, and she did ask everyone to make sure that you are reading your newsletters. And this is dues season, so she will be, as the dues comes in, she'll be getting those cards sent out to you, and everyone should have their new membership card here before the end of the year. But please be patient, as she works through that pile. And again, it's so important to continue to support the PFRO through your dues. So that's the best way to make sure that your association is healthy, because as they go toward watching your pension and being your watchdog, that they really need those numbers that way. And then again, in the newsletter, there will be some legislative updates. We did hear from the person who is in the trenches day in and day out, your association lobbyist there at the state meeting, and who gave a great update on the windfall elimination provision legislation and the House Bill 512. So make sure that you do continue to do that. And then another thing, this time of year, and Jim, I know you and I have been swarmed with police and fire folks. It's a great time for everyone to really look over your Medicare and your coverages, because obviously we're right in the heart of the annual enrollment period, which actually works or affects folks that's on either a Medicare Advantage plan or has a drug plan. And just remember, folks, everyone out there, if you're getting the stipend and want to continue to get the stipend through the Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund, you do have to have either your Advantage plan, your drug plan, or your Medicare supplement through Aon, which is now called a Light. And unfortunately, Jim, I ran into some folks last week, and they just kind of like picked up the phone and talked to Joe Namath last year and actually ended up losing their stipend. So please, 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 folks, if you have questions about your coverages, make sure you reach out to Jim or I, because we really don't want any of our retirees missing out on a benefit that you have worked for and earned over the years. And there has been some changes.
Yeah, and I'm also finding that when we do benefit reviews with our police and fire retirees, a lot of them are paying quite a bit more than they perhaps need to. If you're on a plan G, a plan F, a plan N, those are traditional Medicare supplements. And unfortunately, there's no one reaching out to our retirees and letting them know there's another option, perhaps a better option. Now, if you have some serious or grave health concerns, it's unlikely someone is going to give you a better rate for the same plan. But if you're fairly healthy and you're on a plan N or G or F, please call Bonnie, call me, and see if we can save you some money. It's making a lot of people's days going into the holidays when we're able to save them some $20, some $40 a month. And shockingly, it's that big a disparity. So call for a review, see if we can save you some money, and we'll also answer your questions about your elder care.
And Jim, another thing that I've been running into a lot recently, and even though we don't endorse any one particular Part D drug plan, I've had several retirees or widows who, received information that they're going to be paying $100 or more per month for their drug plan. Folks, if you have not looked at your drug plan in the last few years, you need to do that. Pay attention to the information that they sent you. And that's something that, we can point you in the right direction, or, encourage you to call Aon or Alight and look at that, because we have way too many folks paying way too much money for your Part Ds. So if you have questions on that, again, do the QR code, because again, we don't want you folks paying money that you don't have to. Okay. And that kind of leads into our next slide here, all of the benefits that your Retirees Association has worked to get you, because there are a lot of things out there, just like Jim said, with the Medicare supplements, some of our folks, if they're in good health, maybe they're paying way too much. And unfortunately, not everyone has an endorsed benefit advisor group like you folks do, or you don't, those folks don't have an association like PFRO that's out there, actively finding ways to fill gaps not covered by either the benefits you have or the benefits that you lost. The other thing that's very great is the fact that the benefits that are endorsed by your association are portable. I love working with this group, Jim, because invariably we get to talk to folks that are with us today. Maybe they're living in Florida or Nevada or Arizona, way outside the state of Ohio. So we're glad to be able to bring you the information and have benefits that can extend to you even if you do end up living outside the state. And the other great thing about a lot of these benefits, you could actually extend those to parents or other family members, maybe that's lost coverage or didn't have the coverage or needs that, because, we want you to be able to, prevent either you or a loved one from having to take extended time off. And Jim, we're actually going to talk about the financial impact when a family member does have to, take time off and to care for a loved one. And so today, like Jim alluded to, we're going to be talking about long-term care and some of the home health care, really just presenting you with the problems, the things to look out for, and, the solutions that your association has worked for. So leading into that, think about, why are you attending today? What is it that made you click on the registration button and join us today? Because chances are it's something that's very personal to you. And because long-term care or elder care is the #1 most expensive threat, I'm not quite sure if you folks have really thought about why that is. And it's really kind of a good news, bad news situation. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of advancements in diagnostics and treatment and surgeries that folks can do. We're finding cancer sooner. There's more treatments, that are out there for some of the cancer, heart, stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, those types of things. So because we're finding things faster, because the miracles of modern medicine have increased, our life expectancies are up. And, back when my grandparents, needed elder care, the only option they had was the county home, Jim. So obviously there's been a lot of increases. So that's the good news. But then on the flip side, the bad news is that there is an aging population, which increases the needs and the cost. It's that old supply and demand, economics lesson. The more people that need a room in a long-term care facility, obviously the cost is probably going to go up. And then just with the state of the economy, trying to find folks to be able to staff those, the facilities, have to be more aggressive and pay more and offer more benefits just to try to have their facilities staffed. The other thing that's interesting, and I thought about this yesterday, I was helping a retiree. They had 8 children. So obviously, they may have some options when it comes to someone taking care of them. I have 1 child. And Jim, I know you've got the 2 girls. So, we just don't have the big families to offer that care pool. And, I know my 21-year-old son would do anything for me. But folks, there's things I never want to ask my 21-year-old son to do for me. So, there's some bad news associated there. And then, of course, changes in Medicare, which Jim's going to cover here in a moment. And, obviously, if maybe you did get a long-term care policy many years ago, you've seen some of that have restrictive language in it, or maybe those premiums have just gone up and up and up, where now you're thinking, can I even afford to have this anymore? And then, of course, larger elimination periods, which means, but how long do you have to wait before, some of this care kicks in? And of course, COVID-19 really turned up the spotlight on all of this. And, as folks went in and we had the personal experience there too, from October of 2020 until March of 2021, my mother-in-law, due to COVID, was either in the ICU or a nursing home all but 2 weeks during that time. So that really, turned up amplified the need for elder care and all the bad things that can happen with it. And Jim, I mean, let's be honest. Have you ever met a retiree that woke up in the morning and said, "Woohoo, I'm going to the nursing home today"?
Never.
Never. So, good news, bad news type of thing when it comes there. And really what it gets down to is you each have a nest egg, and that nest egg doesn't necessarily represent a bank account. It really represents the 20, 30, 40 years that you spent accumulating that nest egg and working. So we want to make sure that you do know that you do have ways to protect that nest egg, to do with it whatever you want. So to get started today, we do want to do a little bit of a quiz. Okay, so there on your pencils and paper that you have, we're going to give you a true false quiz. So first of all, number one, long-term disability and long-term care are the same thing. Okay, true or false? Number two, very few people need extended long-term care. Number three, only people over the age of 50 are going to need long-term care. Number four, nursing home confinement is the only long-term care option that's available these days. Number five, and I think this is my personal favorite, Medicare is going to pay for everything. And then finally, I really need to wait and decide until I'm tired or until I'm retired, not tired, retired, or maybe, I don't need to think about this until I actually need it. Okay, is another way to say that. So we're going to address these as we go through, and I'll give you the answer to the first question. Long-term disability and long-term care are not the same thing. So the answer to that question would be false. Long-term disability is a way when, for you folks who are retired, if you think back, long-term disability was actually a program through your employer that would help protect your income. Maybe after you went through all of your vacation, sick time, your PTO time, and you were still hurt or injured or sick, that, then you would actually have the ability to get a percentage of your wages. That's long-term disability. Long-term care is actually extended care. Maybe you've had a fall or a heart attack or a stroke. Dementia has been diagnosed. Maybe you need, some type of care for 3 months, 6 months, longer. And it really, can kind of vary on, the need varies on your age and your gender, and what your diagnosis is. So we'll tease these as we go through and really give you the answers, and then we'll come back at the end and grade everybody's paper. So, and Jim, when we talk about the nest egg and really protecting that nest egg, one of the things that we have to think about is, who's going to need long-term care. And as we think about this, 79% of us ladies are going to need some type of long-term care. And gentlemen, it's actually 70% of you when you're over the age of 65. So if you think about, that your roll call room or your classroom, and you think about who needs that long-term there, there's a great visual representation of that. And a lot of times when I'm speaking to a group, I put stars on folks' paper, and I have those folks raise their hand or stand up for the 30% that won't need it, and then tell everybody in the room to get to be friends with them, because those are the folks that will come visit them in the nursing home. But when you think about, especially for us ladies, a lot of times, we take care of everybody else. And then when it's our turn to be taken care of, everyone else has stepped aside. So what are we going to do? And then when we think about, just the financial impact of long-term care, here's some statistics. So if you're thinking, oh, I've got my nest egg, I've saved, I'm good, I'll self-fund. But have you looked at the cost of long-term care recently? And nationally, what we're looking at, for a home health aide, over 56,000 a year, assisted living over 71,000. If you're in a semi-private room, so that means you may have to, smell your neighbor or fight over the television station with the other person in your room, you're looking at over 108,000, and then a private room at 122. So take those numbers and think about, what does that really mean to my nest egg? And you're probably saying, well, Bonnie, that's nationally. Okay, here in Ohio, it's not like that. Well, Jim and I covered this too. So if you look at Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, you can look there and, really even just a semi-private room in a nursing home, you're looking at between $7,300 and $7,900 per month. And even just a home health aide is over $5,000 a month. So again, look at those figures and, really equate that to your nest egg. So Jim, there's a lot of reasons that people might need long-term care. And, if we're being honest and everything here today, we want to make sure that folks understand kind of what they're looking in for. So I've covered the money and who might need it. Talk to us about some of the other realities, because you have a great vision on this because you were in, that nursing home realm.
I do. And given this is one of the first times we're going over elder care in this webinar environment, I'm going to add something that I haven't before. And that is that admittedly, the long-term care market has turned on its ear in the last 2.5 years. In fact, if you guys will notice, all of these slides that Bonnie and I had 2 years ago when we would go and speak to groups, they all said current realities in long-term care. They said your long-term care plan, gaps in long-term care, Medicare cuts in long-term care. We're really not using those terms as much unless we're dealing with a cognitive event like Alzheimer's, dementia, senility, Parkinson's. You have to understand that COVID has turned the long-term care market on its ear. Like I said, nobody wants to be in a nursing home or even pay for a nursing home plan for 3 years anymore. I haven't met anybody since March of 2020 that says, oh, I got my nursing home plan. I'm so excited about it, because nobody wants to be in a facility after not being able to see our loved ones for 2 years. Our residents locked in the facility. If COVID got in the facility, it was taking residents' lives, prematurely. It was a big deal. The other factor, despite COVID changing the long-term care market, anybody that's under 75 right now, you have to understand that because of the baby boomers, long-term care nursing homes are going to have a waiting list in about 10 to 12 years, and they are typically going to be reserved and chock full of the Alzheimer's, the cognitive, the neurological, Parkinson's, dementia, senility. Those folks that wander and need 24-hour monitoring are going to get priority. This market is going to be predominantly home health care in 12 to 15 years. You will get a bed, you will be able to keep it, but unfortunately, I should say fortunately, because everybody does want to recover or pass away at their home around friends, family, and familiar surroundings anyway. But just understand that as you think about, I'm worried about long-term care. I've heard how expensive it is. The rates are going up all the time. I can't count on my rate staying the same. For traditional long-term care, that is still the case. But there are a couple new products out there called short-term care. And that's something that we'll add in here. It's not crazy expensive. It's not hard to qualify for. It still has its restrictions or limitations, but it's opened the door for our members that, again, can't afford traditional long-term care, can't medically qualify for it, or now post-COVID just don't want it. So forgive my voice. I keep drinking my tea here. But basically, the average time in an assisted living center is over 2 years. It's 28 months. And understand that assisted living is not covered by Medicare. Doesn't matter what your hospital stay is, not what your qualifying stay is. Everybody you see in one of those really nice hotel environments with rehab, it's kind of the halfway house between, home and nursing home, it's $175 to $200 a day, every day out of their pocket. 59% of residents in a facility will move to a nursing home. And again, that's that description of the halfway house. Some people get rehab, go home. Other people ultimately go into a skilled facility care for more aggressive care or end of life. Average person in a nursing home, once you're admitted, 2.2 years. Now, that number is shrinking again because of COVID and because of the baby boomers. Though I don't want to, we don't use fear to get anybody to pursue these things. We use reality. And 70% of men, 9% of women are going to use these plans. But again, where nursing home was the resolve for that last generation, because of the baby boomers, because of COVID, it's going to be some nursing home. But as soon as you can walk and talk and feed yourself, tie your shoes or use the toilet, you're going to be moving home and remain, continue your rehab, at home. 47% of nursing home residents stay less than 100 days. And that's what we're talking about now. They're getting you out of that facility and back home because that's where they want you focusing on your rehab. Much better, results out of home. Men spend an average of 8 months in a facility, women 2.5 years. And the reason being is that's that big disparity. My wife is 11 years younger than me. I mean, I have a built-in caregiver. When you think about that, when I deal with an event, I'm going to be able to come home to a younger, healthier individual to help support me and my needs. Unfortunately, where my wife, Mamie, I'm going to have her. Mamie is not going to have a gym when she needs care. So again, where I can come home and have that support, unfortunately, statistically, she's going to require some elder support. Go ahead, Bonnie. All right. Basically, they use the analogy of a hamburger. To make something good, you've got to add a whole bunch of little things to it. So I'm just going to go through this quickly, but the analogy of, you've got to have to trigger any elder care plan, whether it's long-term care, short-term care, any plan out there that's going to supplement your income when you deal with a major event, it is triggered by your activities of daily living. And if you cannot perform two of those, that's what triggers your either need for a facility, your home care, and or your monies if you have a policy. And those activities of daily living are bathing, toileting, dressing, feeding yourself, continence, and transferring. And that's from a chair to a bed to the toilet, etc. The other thing that will put you into your plan immediately or into a facility immediately is a cognitive event. And that is the Alzheimer's, dementia, senility, severe Parkinson's, anything where you can't cognitively take care of yourself also triggers your facility, home care, and or your plan. So when you build a plan, much like the meat, the biggest question is, what's your daily benefit going to be? Right now, care is about $175 to $200 a day for assisted living, $200 to $225 for a full-blown nursing home. You have to ask yourself, what's your life expectancy? My plan is $300 a day. Even if something happens to me tomorrow, I got $75, $80 cash coming in that I'm not even going to use. I can use it on something else. But I'm preparing because by the time I need care, it's going to be $350 to $400 a day. My plan's going to pay $300. My pension will cover $40,000. That's $100 a day. I can do $400 a day without impacting my family. But think about if you're $80 today, 80 years old today, you can get away with $200. That's the way what the costs are. But if you're 55 or 60, you're going to want to account for that. The next question is length of coverage. This is a big area that has changed. The average plan Bonnie and I helped people with for the last, in my life, 32 years, Bonnie for the last 7 or 8, has been 3 years of nursing home, home health, assisted living, adult daycare, and hospice. Nobody wants, and the most expensive aspect is the nursing home. Nobody wants that anymore. We are now helping people with 6 months of nursing home and a year of home health care. And it's, again, for some people that have Alzheimer's in their background or mom and dad spent years in facilities. I had a similar situation in my family, but determine the length of coverage. And then the third component is your elimination period. And that's just a fancy word for deductible. How long will you pay before your plans kick in? Traditional long-term care plans, they have a 90-day elimination period at minimum. Some have 180. That's just a fancy word for how long do you pay $300 a day before your plan kicks in. 90 days, that's $27,000. Very few of us have that much in an account where our kids can access it before our plan kicks in. Then the location of coverage. Some plans are limited based on whether they're going to cover skilled care, intermediate care, subacute care, telemetry, if you're wandering around or dealing with cardiac events, or some plans are even limited to geography. Where you bought it in Ohio, you're limited to Ohio. And then finally, we talk about inflation protection. That was my example of saying why I chose $300 when costs are $200 today. I'm protecting myself from inflation. Traditional long-term care plans actually have inflation built into them, where the plan goes up in benefits. So if you buy a plan for $200 a day today, by the time you need it in 15 years, it's $325 a day, based on inflation. And then obviously other plans you can build in non-skilled services, which are custodial, and which we'll get into, but I want you to understand, Medicare is going to pay for eligible services. Your eligible services, guys, are your therapies, physical, occupational, speech, respiratory, a nurse, a doctor. Those are eligible services. Medicare is going to cover those. Those services make up 27% of care. The other 73% of care is custodial. And custodial is exactly what it sounds like. That is what Bonnie doesn't want her son, Dalton doing. And that's helping her transfer from a chair to a bed to the toilet, wiping her backside, getting her back in her chair, helping her with her day or night clothes, her soiled linens, her showered, whatever it needs. That's exactly what Medicare doesn't cover, and why your association has an endorsed elder care plan that's going to compensate for that when you need the care. Thanks, Bonnie. So what is extended care? It's care in your home, it's care in a nursing home or a long-term care facility, or, assisted living communities, which those are the ones that are crazy expensive. Medicare covers nothing. So there are only 4 ways for people to pay for long-term care. A lot of people think there are 10 until they see this and they realize this is it. Number 1, you pay cash. Medicare pays its days, or it doesn't if you didn't qualify for them. You pay your today $200 a day, $6,000 a month, $72,000 a year, until you are down to $1,500 as an individual, or basically $2,500 as a couple, and you go to Medicaid, which is healthcare welfare, which is the third little deal there. The second option is assistance from our kids or our friends and family. Most of us, because of COVID, are still helping our kids, so typically that's not an answer. The third is when you're destitute and you've exhausted everything. I don't want to get too deep in the woods here, but believe it or not, until 2 weeks ago, I still had both of my grandmothers alive. One's 102, still doing great. The other one passed at 99 3 weeks ago. My family thought they had it made back in the 70s and 80s. My grandfather was a great investor. They had more money than they could ever do with it. My grandmother went in a facility a year and a half after my grandfather died. She passed at 99 3 weeks ago. She went on Medicaid, never would have expected it, went on Medicaid in 2019, spent everything they had. And then the third way is actually, buttoning up the risk, and that's looking at some form of home health, assisted living, elder care, or long-term care. So who needs it? Unfortunately, we don't have that crystal ball. As people age, they may need help with things once they were able to do for themselves, whether it's an accident, illness, injury, event, heart, pulmonary, cardiac, hip, knee, double hip. It doesn't matter what it is. Unfortunately, the costs are on you, and it has become the number 1 reason for medical bankruptcy for our seniors or retirees, and why PFRO went out and endorsed this plan, or these plans, I should say. So there's a lot of common myths out there. A lot of people think that their health insurance is going to cover long-term care or elder care services. I will beat this till it's dead, but I want you to understand, to qualify for any Medicare days, even one, you have to have 3 midnights in your local hospital as an admitted patient, not an observation, not 3 days, not 1 night in the ER, 2 nights as a patient. It's got to be 3 midnights when that clock strikes 12 as an inpatient. Medicare is then going to gift you 20 days of facility care or home care. 20 days. That is enough time for when you guys realize, hey, this is not a 2-week deal. This is not a 2-month deal. It's not enough time. Now, I'll go into what Medicare will pay as long as you're showing improvement, but I don't want to get hung up on it here. But a lot of people think Medicare is going to cover all of my long-term care costs. You get nothing if you don't have 3 midnights in a hospital. You get 20 days if you do, and then you're assessed, are you showing improvement? If the answer is no, they cut you off, and your max amount of days allotted is 100. Medicare is the same thing as Medicaid. No, Medicaid is healthcare welfare. That's my grandmother after 13 years in a facility and spending everything in her bank account. I'm too young to enroll right now. That's a big deal. I got my plan when I was 53. I wish I would have got it when I was 50. First year I was eligible. But the younger you enroll, the lower your rate is. I pay, believe it or not, I pay $84.17 for a brilliant plan that is going to protect my wife and I when I deal with an event, but I got it when I was young. That same plan's available to somebody that's 80. They're going to pay a little bit more because they've got 23 years to get their money out of me. They've got, 5-6 years to get some out of somebody that's 80, but it's still a whole lot better than, cost effective than traditional long-term care. It's too expensive. Long-term care is, you get what you pay for. That's 3 years of covering everything. And it's part of the Ohio Partnership Program that will limit your exposure to Medicaid and the full spend down, but it's crazy expensive. And it's very hard to qualify for, which brings us into I can't medically qualify. The funnel for long-term care today is, let's imagine a shot glass, 1 ounce, okay? The funnel for recovery care and home care is about the size of my quart of tea, okay? Much different. If you're dealing with diabetes, you can't get long-term care. If you're over 80, you can't get long-term care. If you dealt with cancer, heart, stroke in the past, you can't get long-term care. If you're on any medications beyond, blood pressure, cholesterol, thyroid, it's unlikely you'll get long-term care. But again, the funnel for elder care, short-term care, is significantly wider simply because these companies aren't on the hook for $500,000. They're on the hook for $100,000, which is what most of our members want, giving our families a year and a half to figure out what to do, opposed to Medicare's, 0 or 20 days. Go ahead, Bonnie. So who uses elder care? Top 3 reasons: dementia, heart disease, and I like to use the word mobility, although arthritis is the primary reason why people lose their mobility today. But dementia, heart disease, and mobility. Now, why stroke is not in there, I don't understand. But I really don't understand why stroke's not in there. I've actually not seen this slide before. But I ran nursing homes for 22 years before I came into the state to help. And I will tell you, stroke is probably 20% of all the residents that I dealt with using some form of facility care. And then obviously the difference between men and women, men 31%, women 69%. Reason being, women live 2.5 to 3 years longer than men. And, a lot of women will say, yeah, well, they put us in our, bottom line is that, women have a much higher rate. If you go into nursing homes, it is 100 little ladies scooting around on wheelchairs, playing dominoes and cards, and about 4 or 5 men wandering around that have no idea what's going on. And it's typically Alzheimer's with, men in the early 90s, and women that are dealing pulmonary, cardiac, dementia, arthritic, immobility issues. Average age somebody goes in on a claim is actually 78 years old. That number's climbing a little bit, but unfortunately, COVID dropped that quite a bit. We had quite a few people that required facility care over the past 3 years. So what services are provided? Elder care means you basically don't have to go to a nursing home. You can get, home care, which is really where we focused our energies on the new plans. The community, people assisting you. Assisted living, which again is not covered any way, shape, or form by Medicare, and nursing home, of which again you're going to have anywhere between 0, 20, and 100 days maximum before you're on your own. Another good solution could be purchase some type of elder plan protection. It basically, I use the analogy that you guys have worked so hard to build your nest egg, so hard. I mean, 20, 30 years. Putting money away, putting it in your pension, contributing, and unfortunately, one event can take $70,000, $80,000 out of that. And really, what this is, where it's health insurance for you, it's actually insurance on your nest egg. That when you deal with a major event, and this is the thing that most of our police and fire want to know, nobody is in your bank account. You've got money coming in for 12, 15, 18 months, where you can recover or pass away from that event before anybody's in your savings, selling your stuff, liquidating your assets to pay for bills. I cannot tell you the horror stories of retirees I've dealt with over the last 10 years in my career where spouses and family have sold assets and then somebody's rehabbed. Actually, my dad did it. When my grandma was 95, she had a small stroke. They thought she was gone, sold all the furniture in her room, her refrigerator, got rid of everything. 3 weeks later, they were taking her back to the nursing home. Cost my family $2,000 or $3,000 to refinish her room, and she was angry because it wasn't her stuff anymore. But yeah, you can use, protect a portion of your assets, for the plan, and then stay connected to the things that matter most. The last thing you want is your family being that caregiver and taken away from their careers, their families. Stay-at-home benefits. The new plans provide the ability for somebody to come in and help cook and clean and put your meals in Tupperware and go get your medications and lay them out and help you with your soiled linens. They do personal tasks like the bathing and dressing that we don't want our kids doing. They provide services for nurses and home health aides to help you with those custodial, that 73% of care that Medicare doesn't help, like bathing and toileting and transferring. Special equipment. There's things that DME, durable medical equipment, that Medicare will cover. There are items or better items that people will want to, buy the next one up. Again, that's going to be on you. Home modifications. I can't tell you how many people are shocked when they get home from a facility and it costs them $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 to lower a countertop, widen a doorway, put the old crap bars next to the toilet or a little stair lift, whatever they need upstairs or in the shower. It's expensive, and these benefits help provide those services, so that's not taxing your income. So how do you pay? You could use your savings. Unfortunately, monies may not be available. We have people every day that are moving funds out of the market into the new police and fire retiree investment option to where they can't lose a dime. But that takes 30, 40 days. And, if you deal with an event, you don't want to wait a month or two to be able to have access to pay your bills. You may have to sell valued assets. That's what I tell you, really argue some of our retired men when they come back from rehab and their old car or whatever they had was worth value was easier to sell than the home because of mom, and it's gone. Liquidating assets may trigger income taxes, a result of loss of earnings in the future. And again, you could rely on Medicaid. That's kind of a last resort when people have limited assets. It is healthcare welfare. Unfortunately, those are more of the shoddy facilities that Bonnie kind of described, grandma and grandpa went to back in the day. They're typically state facilities, Medicaid beds. And then you have to spend down your assets to qualify, everything down to basically poverty. And then obviously the state may seek reimbursement from your estate. Unfortunately, there's something called a 5-year look back right now. And we have members that are terminal that will gift their children assets or monies. And unfortunately, if they, overextend themselves, the government can come back to those assets for the family. So just if you have any questions and want to navigate that space, feel free to, reach out and ask Bonnie and I. We've dealt with almost every scenario out there. Bonnie, you want to talk a little bit about this women retiring versus men deal? It's a big deal.
I do. And, we've alluded to it a lot today, Jim. A lot of times, and Jim has a great saying that I always quote. And some of you might be out there thinking, well, this is easy. I have a younger wife or I have a daughter. And Jim's famous saying is a daughter's a daughter all of her life. A son's a son till he takes a wife. And it is so true because as we work with retirees, in every corner of the state and, across the country, it's usually when someone tells me that, oh, I have a daughter and she said that she's never going to make me go into a nursing home. She's going to take care of me. And for those of you who don't recognize, November is actually Long-Term Care Awareness Month. And that was one of the reasons that we queued this topic up. And as I was preparing for this, I was actually watching a local news show a couple weeks ago, and it quoted that there are over 40 million caregivers in the United States. And I just thought to myself, I wonder what the percentage is male to female. And as we think about, if you've made your daughter promise to take care of you, or if your daughter says, oh, that's okay, mom, dad, you can move in with me. And if I need to, I'll quit my job. So here's 2 questions that I have for you folks. Do you want your child to be one of the 40 million? Do you want them to be counted in that? And then when you think about what is the impact, obviously there's financial sacrifices, but if your kids are taking care of their kids, your precious grandbabies, and if they have to figure out how they're going to get little Johnny to baseball practice, and then make sure that you get to rehab or physical therapy or to your 12 different doctor's appointments this week, folks, that comes with a stress level too. And there's many studies out there that talks about the stress that caring for an elderly family member puts on, and then actually just the medical conditions that ensues for the caregiver. But when we think about the financial aspect, and I've got it in red down here on the bottom of this bubble, if women retire early to take care of a relative with those long-term care needs, on average, they're going to lose $324,000 out of their retirement income. So, they're helping you save your retirement income by basically blowing up theirs. And then, when men actually lose 284,000. And one of the things that Jim has quoted before, and I just wanted to circle back to it, 73% of all long-term care is actually provided in the home by those informal caregivers, AKA your kids. So, think about when you make them promise to take care of you, how big of a promise are you asking them to make? So there's a little food for thought for folks, just the financial aspect to it. And Jim, so many times I sit down with a group and they say, oh, that's okay. Medicare is going to take care of my stay or my long-term care needs. Go into a little bit. You gave a great explanation about the observation status, because that's been one of the things that's come into play, especially since the government cut $716 billion out of Medicare's budget. What else do we need to look for to make sure that we can get Medicare to pay as much as possible?
Yeah, the only thing I'll piggyback on what you said a minute ago is, and there's always exceptions. I don't want any moms to get angry with me, but boys are horrible caregivers. We're horrible. My mom had 3 boys. She's in Indianapolis. We're in Chicago, Florida, and I'm in Columbus. I mean, we love her. We give her everything she needs, but unfortunately, we're just not there. And, that's why my mom, has the plans as well. So how much is Medicare indeed going to pay for long-term care? I mentioned this earlier. The reason I mentioned it throughout is because I want you to really understand Medicare cut $716 billion. You can look it up on the Congressional Budget Office between 2013 and 2022, $716 billion. A big reason for this is actually the baby boomers. I mean, a lot of you guys on this call are likely in that market, and you have to realize your impact of, on Medicare. And a lot of people say, Jim, well, what happened in 2013? Well, 2 things. It was the year that the Affordable Care Act went into place. It was also the year the baby boomers started turning 65. So what is Medicare going to pay for long-term care? They are going to pay that 20 days, but only after a 3 midnight, I know it says days, but 3 midnight inpatient admission hospital stay. Then if you're released, it must be to a skilled nursing home. And that's the one you walk into, doesn't smell so good. Some people are, a little bit loud in the hallways, and you see everybody in the dining hall. But I mean, that skilled nursing facility in Medicare is going to pay 100% of your $200 bill today, every day for 20 days. So the first $4,000 they are covered. After which you are on the hook for $200 co-insurance per day. Now, if you're showing improvement on day 20, Medicare will allocate another 20 days for you. You can get, again, like that next line down, a maximum of 100 days. And it doesn't matter what your argument, what your ailment, or what your progress. At day 100, you get a call and you start getting a bill on day 101. You are 100% responsible for your care at that point. Many members will, on day 21 or day 100, pull their family members out, and that's where it consumes the family, and we're at risk. The other thing that I want to make sure people understand, if something happens to me, I'm okay. A, I have a plan. Number 2, or B, I have my wife, Mamie, that's 11 years younger. But I want you to understand, if any of you guys have an event and you have a spouse or someone in the home that can take care of you, you're still okay. It'll cost you an arm or a leg, but you're still okay. But I want you to think about what happens when your spouse, your partner, my Mamie, injures herself ambulating me from a chair to a bed to the toilet, has her own bout of hip, knee, because she'll be 75 when I'm 85, but she has her own bout of hip, knee, stroke, heart, anything it is. The minute something happens to Mamie, my caregiver, or yours, you're both in trouble. And that's where it impacts your entire family. And that's where it becomes grave. So I tell our members that if only one of you can afford a plan, it's a lot more important that my wife, Mamie, or your younger spouse or the caregiver does, because that's the individual that you want to protect. I do as a husband, but it's also the person that if they get in trouble, the whole family's down. So that's the person you also want to make. We recommend both people have protections because, again, 79% of women, 70% of men. But if you're looking at budget and the more important person, it's that caregiver to the senior spouse. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Jim, if we could just circle back to the $200 co-insurance per day. Obviously Medicare would pay the first 20 days at 100%. And then day 21 through 100, Medicare's paying 80%. We have folks that's on a Medicare supplement and a potentially an Advantage plan. If you would just maybe talk about how that $200 copay is handled differently between those two.
I don't work with a lot of Advantage plans, and are you familiar with the way they work with Advantage plans, Bonnie?
A lot of times, and if you are on an Advantage plan as you're analyzing them this time of year, just make sure, you're asking the question, what would my copay be? Because, many times with the Advantage plans, there is a copay there that you would be responsible for, until you got up to your maximum out of pocket. On the Medicare supplement, of course, that's part of the 20% that's handled by your supplement. So, that's just one of those things as you're analyzing and figuring out what's best for me. One more thing to kind of kick in there if you are looking at, one of the Advantage plans that way. So,
yeah, and if people are wondering why didn't Jim, respond to that? Honestly, I'm not a big fan of Advantage plans. They do have networks. They have co-pays on everything. They have big max out of pockets that you don't really realize until you deal with an event like an elder care stay. And not only are you paying for your room, but you're paying, sometimes $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, max out of pockets in that calendar year. And again, where Bonnie's very familiar with them, several of our advisors are. And if you're on an Advantage plan right now and you really don't understand your max out of pocket or what it could look like if you deal with an event and you're kind of stuck in there, again, totally off the subject of elder care or long-term care, but click that little, QRC code and have Bonnie or I, give you a call and just make sure you're taking advantage of everything you're eligible for and you are on the most comprehensive plan based on your age. I will tell people, if you're healthy as a horse and you're 65, there's a strong argument for, Medicare Advantage plans. They're cheap, but you get what you pay for. Low premium equals high risk. Once we hit 70, 75, it's kind of like our 100,000 mile check on a 1980s or 90s car. Our belts and hoses start going and, we need a little bit more care. And that's where a traditional Medicare supplement is going to provide a little bit more security. So observation status. This is what I was referring to, that you need a 3 midnight hospital stay to qualify for your Medicare days, those first 20. Well, Medicare is using a designation called observation days. So if Bonnie's my spouse and something happens to me, she takes me to the hospital or we dial 911, they take me in and they say, Bonnie, we don't know what's going on with Jim, but we're going to put him in observation. 99% of spouses, significant others say, oh, that's wonderful. That's why we came. I'll be right here in the lobby. Tell me what's going on with him. That is no longer the desired response. Now I will tell you, if you go in for chest pain, belly pain, or a little bit of, something else, there is a place for observation. It could be gas, and a lot of times it is. That's why they have observation. But if you had loss of consciousness, an automobile accident, anything with head trauma, loss of, like I said, head injury, anything major, you want to argue to be admitted. And I will tell you, once you start arguing to be admitted, they will start considering admission because they're going to know, exactly how this game's played. And without 3 midnights as an admission, you forfeit your Medicare days. You're simply not going to get a dime from them. So again, if you deal with an event, any event, you go into an ER and they suggest observation status, just question, why am I being put in observation? Why not admitted? And if it turns out to be, a cardiac, a pulmonary, any cognitive event, anything stroke related, you are going to be darn glad that you fought for that day, because it's the difference between Medicare paying and not paying the first 20 to 100 days of your plan. What if I don't get better? As soon, and that's why I said on day 20, you get assessed. If you have 3 midnights in a hospital, Medicare is going to call your doctor and nurse station on day 20 and say, is Bonnie Norris showing ample improvement, substantial noticeable improvement based on her diagnosis and prognosis? If the answer is yes, Medicare will gift that individual another 20 days. And again, based on coinsurance, but you'll have another, 20-day Medicare benefit. But the minute that the nursing facility, your caregiver, determines you are no longer getting better or improving, Medicare stops that day. You become 100% private pay. And that's typically when people are taking members home, because we simply can't afford $225 a day. We're back to the burger. So are there any other options? Yeah. I mean, you've got long-term care. Now, again, traditional long-term care, hard to qualify for. It's expensive, but it's going to protect just about everything in your estate. And I don't want to poo-poo, long-term care. There's a place for it. If you have a family farm, if you have an inheritance, if you have a family business that's worth, $1 million, one stint of Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive event could wipe all of that out. That's what long-term care is for. It's asset protection. Elder care, short-term care, it's also asset protection, but it's really just protecting your family. And instead of having 20 days to figure out what are we going to do, they have a year, year and a half for you to recover or pass away before you become that, major event. So other unique options people can use for elder care. Some people use life insurance. They'll use, accelerated death benefit. Actually your police and fire retirees have something called a living promise, which is it's basically a life insurance policy that pays your beneficiaries, $10, $20, $30,000. Well, we have members that are diagnosed terminal and unfortunately can't afford their care. They can access those monies early and use them as non-taxable, income to pay for those, services. So it's not on the family. There's also a very new, and Bonnie mentioned it earlier, but it's the second most frequent call we're getting into the association. There is a new tax deferred asset protection plan where our members can put monies in indices, an index in the market. And as the market goes up, which it will, guys, may take a year, but it's going to go up, always does after elections and after wars. But as the market goes up, we make money. If the market is flat the way it is right now or down the way it is the last 12 months, our money's freeze at its high water mark. And I'll tell you, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I was not a big fan of the election 18 months ago. I was not a big fan of what I thought the Green New Deal would do to the economy. I took my money out of the market and I put it in police and fire retirees fund. I am the only person I know that has not lost one dime in the last 20 months, 24 months, not one penny. So if anybody's interested in how can we stop the bleeding on your investments, tax deferred compensation, anything, if you're, losing 15, 20%, let us know, we can help. Both are strategies if your health issues are a problem. If you don't want to spend money on long-term care. And again, the question is, there's still 15, 20% of us that are going to die in our sleep. We will never use our long-term care. That's another reason we love short-term care, is you're covering the risk, but hedging your bet. You can use your required, minimum distributions, your RMDs, health savings account, obviously use that to save taxes. And then we have some folks, guys, that unfortunately, if you're dealing with a cancer, or you have in the last couple of years, unfortunately, you're not eligible for everything Bonnie and I are talking about. But for those folks, the state has, your police and fire retirees have a heart and stroke plan, which are the primary reasons people require facility care. So if you can't qualify for one, we can help you with a disease-specific plan. If you've dealt with a heart attack or stroke recently, again, you can't get it, but you're eligible for cancer coverage. So that there are ways that we can button up those, even if your health limits your ability to qualify for elder care. But we strongly encourage you to kick the tire. Good decisions are based on good information. And so many of our members really don't understand, how we're left holding the bag when we require care. Bonnie, you want to go through this quiz again?
Yeah, so hopefully you folks have learned a lot today. And Jim and I are not advocating that everybody on the call needs everything we talked about today, but we are advocating that everyone needs to at least think about having a plan in place. And hopefully we've given you, the information, as Jim just said, that you can make the best decision based on the best information. So as we go back and we review our quiz here, obviously I gave you the answer to the first one. Long-term disability is far different than long-term care. And as far as, very few people needing extended or long-term care, folks, we've talked about that throughout. Us ladies are going to need 79% of us over the age of 65 are going to need some type of elder care, whether that's home health, assisted living, or a nursing home. And obviously, 70% total are going to need some of that. So, that's far cry from very few people. And then only people over the age of 50 need long-term care. And more we're seeing folks that are having strokes earlier, are having heart attacks earlier, or car wrecks, or even just COVID has put a lot of folks, into needing some type of long-term care. So obviously that question is false too. And then as far as nursing home confinement being the only option, it's not anymore. And Jim made a valuable point that, as the baby boomers continue to age, and those beds in your traditional skilled nursing facilities are taken up by folks with dementia and Alzheimer's and other cognitive issues, there needs to be other types of care offered. And quite frankly, as I said earlier, none of our retirees get up in the morning and say, woohoo, I am moving to the nursing home today. We want to be able to stay in our homes, surrounded by our things, the people that we know, the television stations, our programs that we like. We want to stay at home, as long as possible. And so there are different ways to take care of the elder care issue. And obviously Medicare, we've hit on that pretty hard today. It does not pay for everything. And we may have some folks out there on TRICARE also, or, another type of insurance plan. Go to the website, read what your coverage pays for. And if you think, oh, that's going to take care of everything, again, it is limited. So make sure that you do become familiar with that. And then, should I wait to decide until I'm retired or until I need it? And for our firefighters out there, did you ever have a homeowner that you rolled up to put the fire out? On the phone, they're calling their local insurance agent to get fire insurance at that point. It's sort of the same thing. When you need it, it's probably, way too late to get it. So, folks, we have Thanksgiving coming up next week, the holiday season coming. You're going to be able to be around your friends and family and local support groups. But Jim and I both encourage you to, have the conversation with your family. And it's an uncomfortable conversation. And you may find that your kids are a little squeamish about it, but you know what? It's an important conversation to have. And hopefully you can bring up, some of the information that we provided today. It's not a, what if. For many folks, it's a when, not a what if. So, hopefully, if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the questions and answers. Here's our QR code again. If you want to just send an email, you can send that to me with your name and phone number and email address. And then, Jim or I will be the ones contacting you to sit down and just have this conversation. Again, we're not saying that, you need to buy a plan to put in place. But you do at least need to have a conversation, because as you saw today, there are many different ways to tackle this extreme, huge problem. And when we started today, the question was, what's the number one most expensive threat to our retirees? And it's elder care. But fortunately, because of the foresight of your association, they have come up with several different ways to solve this very, very large problem. So Jim, anything else that we need to add today?
No, for those of you with pen and paper, I know obviously if you're on Zoom, you use email and you're fairly, computer proficient, but if you prefer to call, I'll give you my direct dial. I'm in Columbus. It's 614-946-4868. And I typically manage the northern, hemisphere of the state of Ohio, and Bonnie on the south. So if I can help with anything, or Bonnie, you want to give me your number in the event that dial is a little bit easier for them?
Yeah, I sure will. And actually, I'm pulling up the screen here, Jim. So we've got it in writing.
Oh,
because I
good.
know sometimes that's a little easier to do if I can move things around here. But mine is 937-533-1446. And you can see Jim's there. And then also that's our email addresses. So we do encourage everyone to reach out if you've got any questions today, really about anything. You know, your association has several valuable benefits. And if you just have questions about those or what your current coverage is, or just trying to understand, you know, how Medicare and your current coverage fits into all of this, you know, that's why your association has Jim and I. So again, we thank everyone for attending today. And, you know, hopefully everyone has a great holiday season. And just as a program reminder, in December, with the Christmas season, instead of being the third Tuesday of the month, we will actually be doing the second Tuesday of the month. And Missy will be sending out the information on that. But it will be December the 13th at 11 a.m. We will be doing the PFRO Teaching Tuesday. And again, we'll be highlighting all of the discounts and benefits that you get just because you're a member of the Police and Fire Retirees of Ohio. So again, thank you all for your service, and have a great Thanksgiving.